I don't want to spoil things too much, but what do you think that this lo-fi beat and this kind of post-rock tune have in common? Well, actually, they're both built off of the exact same orchestral arrangement that I made with a brand new free orchestral library from Spitfire Audio. It's the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Discover, a free version of their much larger orchestral library. And thank you to Spitfire Audio for sponsoring today's video. Let's take a look at some sounds. All right, those are just some short demos, but now we're actually going to write a little orchestral arrangement. And if you're thinking, well, I'm never going to write orchestral music, trust me, just stick with me. We're going to take this and turn it into something completely different. So let's start by loading up Contact in Ableton Live on a MIDI track. And among all my libraries, we'll find the SSO Discover library. And we can start auditioning some sounds. I don't know why, but I tend to want to start with piano just to lay down some like basic chords and melodies that we can layer on top of with the other instruments. So let's choose the grand piano to start. I don't really know how I come up with these initial ideas. Usually it's just about putting your hands on the keyboard and starting to play things. But if you notice, I'm just kind of playing around in the F major sort of area and coming up with more of a rhythmic pattern than anything. And if I just shift my left hand to change the root note to a B flat, I can play that same rhythm, but the chord changes. Then I start thinking about adding other variation, like what if we lifted the root note and also lifted the top note? And if we turned this B flat major chord implied into a B flat minor chord, now we've got our first idea, which will sort of be the foundation of the track here. If you can start with an 8-bar phrase versus a 4-bar phrase, I mean, potentially you could even go for a 16-bar phrase. But with this kind of looped and repetitive figure here, the longer you can play and the more variation you can add, the more interesting it becomes for the listener. So I'm starting to think compositionally, even though we're only just starting to work in loops. Now, I'd like to generate a little bit of atmosphere, so I'm going to duplicate this piano track and delete the loop on it. And what I'd like to do is just use Ableton Live's reverb. I'm going to play this really simple sounding chord and freeze the reverb tail. This is going to help us create a drone that can sort of help our track be a little more mystical, maybe. So I'll just take an audio track now that we have that reverb freeze happening. And I'm going to take the audio from track 2 and route it into track 3. You can see that that sound is coming into track 3. And I will just go ahead and record it as a clip. So now I can get rid of this original track because we've got our freeze here. I can add even more reverb on top of that to make it even more spacey. Let's figure out what our next instrument should be. I'm a huge fan of expressive strings. I think this violin's going to work really well. And I have the ability to get that sort of slur up to the next note by just playing the notes slightly overlapping from each other. Otherwise, I can play the notes legato, but still separated. But I think that slurred note just adds to the natural nature of the sound. And one thing I remembered is that we were going to turn up the tempo. So let's go ahead and get this going a little faster. But now we could experiment with loading up more of a strings ensemble. So we've got violas and violins, or we also have a cello section. If I want something much lower, which could be helpful here because we don't really have any bass yet. We do have another articulation here, spiccato, so a much shorter sound. Little motion underneath with the cello is just enough to keep driving us forward. I'm not sure where we're going yet, but we're driving forward. All right, let's move off strings for now. I have always loved the sound of a cor anglais, which is kind of like an oboe instrument, but it also gives sort of a softer brassy sound, even though it's not a brass instrument. All right, I think I've got a good melodic idea that won't necessarily step on the violin. What I want to do is just introduce this melody later in the phrase. And then I can use the dynamics on the mod wheel to decrescendo out of that. Let's take this same exact melodic idea. It's either got to be the xylophone or the glockenspiel. All right, I don't think adding any big brass will fit in this song, but we could introduce some kind of flute sound, and maybe it can sort of like help pushing the urgency along with the cello. So we have this very, very prominent violin. I want to take that violin away for a moment and just hear how the ensemble is doing on its own. Let's take the piano away. All of these light little elements are sounding very natural together. So I don't really make and release orchestral music, but we've gotten this far. So what can we do with this? All right, so check this out. It all sounds pretty familiar, right? As it should. Let's drop a little something in. With a few extra elements, we take those gorgeous orchestral sounds and we end up creating a pretty cool lo-fi hip hop beat. All right, but don't panic. Things didn't get too complicated. Right here in this group, I have all the individual parts we just made. All of the instruments from Discover, all of the parts are still here playing. It's a little faster. You can see I've beefed up the tempo a little bit. Okay, so what did we add besides the Discover instruments? Really, it just comes down to four main elements, including shakers, just very simple shakers and hi-hat loops to give us that initial groove. In addition to a very simple kick snare pattern, probably the simplest element of them all, a deep low sub bass that literally just plays an F and a B flat. The root notes that we came up with in that process earlier. And then finally, just one electronic element. This is from Ableton Live's Drift Synth, which I believe is available in all versions of Ableton Live. And the preset is called Haven Pad. So it's just one electronic element that sort of balances out all of those acoustic orchestral elements. And when you put them all together, I think it sounds pretty good and pretty natural. And if you're thinking, well, TAETRO, that's just a boring lo-fi beat, well, sorry, y'all, I could not resist breaking out the guitar for this one, but same orchestral part, but similar to the lo-fi beat, a few added parts, obviously. The first one, the most prominent, is probably these drums, just a drum loop that I got from Splice, followed by the electric bass instrument in Ableton Live, just really simple to add some low end in there. Nothing to write home about, really. Followed by, of course, the guitar. And I'm just doing all that processing with Guitar Rig to get that big chunky sound. And also I recorded the guitar part twice and panned one hard left and one hard right. And when they come together, you get this really big guitar sound. And I wanted a really big epic guitar sound because we've got a whole orchestra here at our disposal. And this time I actually did add a little bit to the orchestral elements with Discover, but it wasn't all that complicated. Initially, we just had this solo violin, right? But I feel like we needed to go a bit bigger if we were going to go with these loud drums and guitars. So I took that exact same melody on the violin and I placed it on a new Discover instrument. This time, it's the violin section and it's playing up an octave. So when you combine that with the solo violin, they're both contributing to this slightly more epic version of that melody. Also, I basically just took the MIDI from that electric bass line I mentioned earlier and put it on an additional cello section layer. So then we not only have the electric bass, but we have this really low, robust cello section. Finally, we had the cor anglais, which how many times can I say cor anglais in this video? But it was a little too soft and mellow for this new epic version. So I was able to replace it with some horns. As well as some trumpets. Other than that, the entirety of the orchestral session, here let's just solo the orchestra only. It's the same thing, just with a few core elements added. Oh, and I should mention, previously we were working off of like an 8-bar harmonization where it just went from F to B flat, the 1 to the 4 chord. This time around, I actually extended that. So if we take a look at the cello, it's sort of been not reharmonized, but additionally harmonized. We go from the F to the B flat, A sharp, down to a D minor, to an A, which gives this version its own epicness for sure. But it's funny to think this same sort of orchestral arrangement, hear it just on its own, it almost sounds wedding-like, maybe an epic wedding. And then previously, it was just like super mellow and low. It can work for the lo-fi, and then it can work for this kind of like post-rock situation. I would love to know, did you prefer the orchestra by itself, the lo-fi beat version, or the kind of post-rocky kind of version? I can't stress this enough, this orchestral library is free, and even if you didn't think of yourself as using orchestral instruments before, hopefully I've showcased kind of 2 very unique ways you can use them in more modern production, even if you're not doing like orchestral scoring or something like that. Link is in the description. Grab the Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Discover down in the description below. Leave a like on your way out. Thanks again to my channel members for supporting, and thank you to Spitfire for sponsoring today's video. That's going to be it for now. This has been TAETRO. Have a good one.